The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. Lovely to have you here. Hello, Hank. I still, Smoky Hunter. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I still haven't replied to your email, mate. Forgive me. I'll get it done on the weekend. Anyway, here it's the appointed time, so we've got a good roll-up today. Good to have you with us. How's the volume, folks? Someone just type in the question box. Let me know that you can hear me all right. Yeah. Adrian, down in Adelaide. Hello, mate. Yeah, good. Okay, well, that's good. Thank you. And Neil, good, up in Chinchilla, all over the country and elsewhere. Hank, down in the Hunter. Good, good. We've got all the Aussies on today. Good to have you with us, folks. Okay. And Thomas up in far, far North Canada. He was telling me about the snow up there when I was talking to him yesterday. My God, it's terrifying. Anyway, great to have you with us, folks. We're getting to the end of the year again. And welcome to all of you, Adrian, down in Adelaide, Albert. Carol, one of our few ladies who we cherish. Love to have you with us. Chase, the guy who nagged me long enough to give up smoking. Gary, of course. Hank, and down in the Hunter Valley. Howard over in New Zealand. Howard's just done a tutorial. He was over here for the Gold Coast tutorial. And we had a great time. We really did. If you missed it, I can tell you missed out on something. Jeff, lovely to have you with us. Joel, of course. John down in Coffs Harbour. Good to have you with us, mate. He was came to the Gold Coast tutorial as well. Justin down there in the Hunter. Good to have you, Mark, the tutorial guy. Justin, so's he. Oh, Lord. Everyone's here. Murph, the legendary Murph. Good to have you with us, my friend. Nathan, we haven't heard from you for a while. I hope you're all right over there in New Zealand, and let me know if there's anything we can do for you, mate. I know that you got messed about a bit. We'll see what we can do to sort things out for you. Neil up there in Chinchilla, and Noel, Peter. He's the short-term trading guru. Peter King up in Warwick, I think. Another couple of Peters. Philip, Randall. Good to have you with us. Rolf, yes, thank you. And Terry, Thomas up in the far north. Trevor. Grand. Oh, well, if I haven't said hello to you, I greet you. It's good to have you with us. And for those of you who are new to us, the picture that you're seeing, this is a painting of Daniel, our hero, and this is a painting by Michelangelo on the roof of the Sistine Chapel at the Vatican in Rome. We tend to think of these people as old men, but you can see that Michelangelo showed him as a young, strong, vigorous young man, and I think that's probably a much better interpretation of the marvels that they did, indeed. All right, let's get going. Lots to talk about today, folks, as always. Let's see what we've got. Well, this is those of you who've been with us for a while will know that our markets are orderly. Howard, you're very good. That's terrific. Sometimes predictable, which is great. And let's review what the markets have been doing for 2019. This is a 24-day chart, folks. Every one of these bars is 24 trading days. So this is the Daniel Code really long-term chart, or monthly chart equivalent, if you like. And you can see it's now heading for that upper dotted line. It's been there once before and was refused. It's going to have another go at it. And that's significant because that upper line is 3 standard deviations from the mean. Now, let me caution you that by standard deviations, we don't use the normal mathematical standard deviations. We use a proprietary Daniel Code standard deviation. But that level of being overbought, wow, it's very, very extreme. What the market's likely to do around there, goodness only knows. But I mean, it's just been a tremendous, tremendous bull market, hasn't it? Historic bull market. It's been absolutely wonderful. Let's move on. This is US T-bonds. Very interesting. Have a look at this. How the for the whole of 2000, well, from earlier than 2019, starting up in late 16, early 17, it started to pull back. And it's pulled back 100% of its range. Pretty unusual to see that. That's a massive move. Remember that interest rates are effectively the opposite of what the chart is showing you. The chart is the pricing of the market, the US T-bond. So on this chart, going down means market going up and vice versa. And you can see after that enormous pullback, it's gone back up, and it's just hovering a bit below the thicker extension of the thicker blue line, which is the median. It's quite extraordinary to me that we've had a move on T-bonds so big with very, very few repercussions, if any. It's quite extraordinary. Of course, that's the reflection of the Fed's efforts when they tried to increase interest rates. And of course, what's been happening every time the Fed has even hinted at increasing interest rates, the equities markets have had a tantrum. They've got very used to being sport for a long time. The other one that's instrumental in everything that's happening in markets is, of course, the level of the US dollar index. It's pretty, in my view, it's pretty depressed, or it's suppressed is probably a better word. And what we can be sure of is that, Trump is a real mercantilist. He's a businessman. He knows that a cheaper dollar is better for exports, and of course, au contraire, harmful for imports. So there's been a concerted effort during the whole of Trump's time to keep the US dollar relatively weak. Having said that, it depends what currency. This is the actual US dollar index, which is against a basket of currencies. If you look at the cross rates, farmers will tell you that they're just not competitive on international markets with soybeans at the moment because the US dollar is so strong, which is the opposite view than what you get if you're taking an objective look at the charts. But everyone talks their trade, don't they? So you can always get two sides of that argument. But I think that's a given for next year, that we continue to see the US dollar suppressed to a level. This is the Shanghai Composite. I haven't shown you the Hang Seng, which is the Hong Kong market, but it's very high. I know it's been weakened a bit by the drop-off of some tourism and other general bad news from the protests that have been going on over there. But you can see this main market has just been incredibly stable. It really hasn't moved much at all since 2014. Now, remember that China is a command economy. It does what it's told to do, and the government, such as it is in a position to make the market do pretty much what it wants. There are some limits to that, but we haven't reached them yet. Here's Germany's DAX. I'm trying to give you a world view of what's been happening this year. Look, it's pretty happy. It's had a bit of a pullback last year, and it's been making a strong effort to get back to its median. It's just above its median now. It's nothing terribly exciting, but the trend is up, continually up. It's another economy that's doing pretty well. Here's London's FTSE, which you would have thought would have had much more turmoil, given that the UK's in a fairly serious fight to leave the European Union, Brexit. That's Britain exiting the European Union. And over the last 3 years, it's either it is going to leave, or it's not going to leave, or it is going to leave. I mean, you just get sick of listening to it all. It's a bit like some of the political comment in the US that, there's just so much drama every day that you get to the stage, or at least I have, where, I can't find a big enough filter to get over the top of just the same thing day after day after day. I mean, journalists, I don't know how they live long with the level of emotion they must be under. And they certainly try to engender it, don't they? But, the FTSE, I would have thought it would have suffered more, but it hasn't. It's maintained that big upward trend very solidly. and you can see the last decent big up bar. That's the result of the last election, which was held on the 12th of this month, and I'm going to talk to you more about that. It was quite extraordinary, the result for the Conservatives, or the equivalent of the Republican Party, if you like. Here's the general commodity index. It shows commodities fairly subdued. They haven't sort of really sparked up much for a number of years. They've tried to recover their mean. They haven't, but they're just there's nothing too dramatic there, other than to say that generally they are a bit subdued, but nothing too exciting there. This is the other end of the world for most of you. This is Australia's SPI, the share price index, which is a broad measure of what the Australian stock market is doing. And as you can see, it's pretty happy. It's roaring along up there. There's a couple of these indexes. One's called the All Ordinaries. It's actually, I think, it's made new all-time highs. And you can see I put a little arrow here to just show you what a different political outlook makes. That's an election back in March this year, where Scott Morrison, or ScoMo, as the media insist on giving everyone an abbreviated name for some childish reason. Anyway, ScoMo, such as he is, he won that election very, very unexpectedly. He was really, it was a bit like the Hillary Clinton Trump election. The media were all in. The media pretty much all socialists, if not, they're certainly left-leaning. The Australian media were all in for the Labor Party and its candidate, Bill Shorten, and the polls were showing that they were pretty much a certainty. It's all over Red Rover for the Liberals, who are not Liberal. Remember, in Australia, the Liberal Party is a conservative coalition between the Liberal Party and the the Australian National Party, which is actually the Old Country Party. It's the Farmers' Party, if you like, and they're in coalition with the Liberals, who are not Liberals. They're really the Conservatives, and the opposition party is called the Labor. So once you've got that part clear, you'll understand all of this. But you can see the market's been pretty thrilled since Morrison very, very unexpectedly won that election. And it's really interesting because for those of you who've been with us for a while and who come to these webinars, you'll recall me talking about all the shenanigans that were going on before that general election in Australia right at the beginning of this year, where there was pretty much a third party revolt, if you like, between the dominant factors within the government. And it was a dispute essentially between those who saw themselves as moderates and those who saw themselves as liberal. I'm using that in the American expression, use of the word now, that some of those very, very senior people in the government party, which was the Liberal Party then, were really themselves quite opposed to what, as a Conservative party, the Liberal Party and the National Party coalition really stood for. And there were leaders of that party who were undermining the party and doing inestimable damage. And those who saw that webinar after about March will remember me pointing out one Julie Bishop, who was the foreign minister, who I said was, as far as I could see, pretty much a showboat for fancy clothes and expensive shoes, and as far as I was aware, she did nothing to achieve anything worthwhile for this country except, as foreign minister, swan around the place and spend great amounts of the taxpayers' money largely on herself. But she then went off to, she left the party before the election. She was pretty much told that you're not going where you wanted to. She had the temerity to put herself up as potential leader of the party. And she got 11 votes, like nothing. And then she left the party. But she had the temerity to go to one of the commercial television stations and asked to be a commentator on the election results with some really nasty stuff, pictures of her red high heels. I don't know why they're particularly autonomous to her, but the television company mocked that up as a schematic or a graphic on their results presentation, with the idea that as all these good old government people lost their seat, they were going to get kicked out. The boot would swing and they'd be kicked out by Julie's painted heels. I mean, the absolute hubris of it. This was a woman who was despised and rejected by her party only a few weeks before, but the ego is just so immense, it just keeps on going endlessly. And you're going to see an absolute carbon copy of that all the way around the other part of the world for what's been happening in Britain with the general election there on the 12th of this month, and what happened thereafter. But anyway, we'll come to that. But there's the Australian share price in there. It's doing very, very well, isn't it? I'm not quite sure why, but it's a bit of a double barrel. The government, the banks, the big banks, had a bit of a fright after the Banking Royal Commission had tightened up their lending criteria, and Australia's just been having the world's greatest property boom on the back of, you've all seen it before, there's nothing new in this business, 100% LTV, ninja loans, the whole 9 yards, which you saw in the States. That's been going on in Australia. The minute they had to, people actually had to verify that they had some real income, it all came to a screeching halt. But the government put enough pressure on the banks to say, lighten up, we've got to keep the party going. And the party, of course, is just massive property prices. Paul Keating made, an ex-Prime Minister of Australia, made a very good point that back in the day when interest rates were somewhat more normal, there was one mega millionaire in the whole of Australia. That was Kerry Packer. Now, I mean, there are hundreds of them. There are millionaires everywhere. There are just, in Sydney and Melbourne, probably better than 60% of the suburbs have an average price of over $1 million. I mean, it is quite extraordinary, really, really extraordinary. If you saw these places that they want over $1 million for, you just scratch your head and say, I mean, someone's mad, and you always think it's not you, but it's been going on a long time now. One of the big issues that's come out of this year, 2019 in particular, is that personalities matter so much in politics this year. This current time we live in, I don't know whether that's more because of social media, more that the electorate's less disciplined. I don't know what it is, but we've got this constant picture now of people are getting elected that the populace like, that the electors like. And you can see the happy, smiley guy on the left is Scott Morrison, who won the election in March. He had been the Prime Minister. He sort of inherited the Prime Ministership after that dreadful Turnbull got sacked. And local poll. Janet, let me come back to you with that. So true. He won the election. A huge surprise, because the media and the polls were all in on his opposition, Bill Shorten, who you can see there looking like a cranky trade union official, which essentially is what he is. But the electorate just didn't like Bill, and paid no regard to his policies, just didn't like Bill. It was as simple as that. And you've now seen exactly the same thing happen in the UK with Jeremy Corbyn. Interesting that Australia is one of the very few countries in the world that has compulsory voting, and there's a reason for that. In UK and US, most of the bigger economies, voting is optional, and that's a very good thing, because if you force people to vote who don't know anything about it, who don't care anything about politics, you just enlarge the donkey vote. But there's a reason why they have to have it in Australia. As Janet just told me here, local poll has 75% of Australians despising and distrusting politicians who only work for their own benefit, and that's so true. In many regards, they've earned that sobriquet, but The reality is that Australians have such a low opinion of politicians that if we didn't have compulsory voting, I think the estimates are that you'd probably only get 11% of the population voting, which, I mean, you just couldn't have it, which is why they have to have compulsory voting. But Australians are just totally disgusted with pretty well all politicians. But it was interesting to see that this difference in this personality parade, because the same thing has happened in England. We haven't quite finished in Australia, but this is someone who was very popular. And this is Bill Shorten's wife, Chloe, who you can see. She's a very attractive-looking lady. Great Labor Party pedigree. Her mother was the same in Canada, says Thomas. Her mother was the Governor-General of Australia. She's a very charming lady, very vivacious. Apparently everyone loves Chloe. But Bill, somehow or other, she was very much a married lady with a couple of children. And he was married with a family as well, but somehow or other, God knows how, Chloe might need to get her glasses fixed, or maybe she doesn't even wear glasses. That might be the problem. But old Bill got hold of her somehow or other, and they both left their respective spouses and got married to each other. And Chloe's immensely popular, and the Labor Party was trotting her out as sort of the face of the election campaign when it became clear that Bill wasn't getting much traction. But, I mean, it got to the stage, if you believe this, of him running around on the morning of the elections in a T-shirt saying, vote for Chloe Shorten's husband. Can you believe that? And that became part of their campaigning slogan. I mean, it's just so asinine, it's embarrassing. But anyway, Chloe's a good sort, and good on her for that. But Bill, shocker. These Labor politicians, I mean, I don't know what they're smoking, but the idea, it's everywhere. You're getting it with the Democrats, of course, all these, a lot of these people standing in the Democratic for the primaries there. It's the free everything, you know. No one's ever got to pay, just give it this, pay, oh, only the rich will pay. Well, of course, that doesn't go across. Personality, this is the UK, where the contrast was even more extreme. The tussle-headed blondie on the right of your screen, that's Boris Johnson. Bojo, of course, naturally, according to the media, who had the most incredible turmoil and drama leading up to the election on the 12th of December. And the creepy-looking guy on the other side of the page is Jeremy Corbyn, who's a Marxist, probably a Trotskyite as well, lover of the IRA, friend of Palestinian terrorists, and at least a deep socialist, who took to the election these proposals of nationalising everything, the railways, everything that's not nationalised, let's nationalise it, was his point. And that's going to be paid for with massive taxes on the rich, and pretty well taxes on a whole lot of people who wouldn't consider themselves terribly rich. Let's, by the way, let's confiscate 10% of all the big public companies and make that a gift to the workers in various ways. I mean, it is just absolutely scabulous stuff. Peter saying, Bojo and ScoMo, what a circus. Well, it seems to be a thing with journalists. For some reason, they don't like to pronounce people's full names, I guess. Maybe it's too hard to type the extra digits, who knows. But anyway, what happened with Boris? Well, both stories, one story is equally as ridiculous as the other. What happened with Jeremy is after Miliband blew it all up, said he didn't want to be leader of the opposition, four of the leading lights in the Labor Party put themselves up to stand for election as the new leader of the opposition. And one of the ladies, a good-hearted old chook, I'm sure, said, "Oh well, we're not really giving the left much of an option here. We should have a candidate who is off the left, so that we can say that, you know, we're a party for all people. We should have at least a left-wing, really left-wing candidate standing for election. Ha ha, they won't get elected, you're kidding. And they went and they chose dear old Jeremy, who'd been in Parliament for about 40 years. I don't think anyone had ever heard of him in Parliament. He certainly didn't sponsor any legislation. He was pretty much just the old joke of he was the old Trotskyite in Parliament. He, as I say, friend of the IRA, friend of Palestinian terrorists. And they said, well, just, let's get Jeremy to stand as the left-wing option. He won't do anything. He won't get 10 votes. Anyway, Jeremy came up with the idea that the Labour Party needed to be much more inclusive and let a whole lot of new people into the party. And what he managed to get through is that you could pay £3 to the Labour Party and you could immediately vote. And that brought in this massive, massive influx of young people, liberals, left-wingers, you name it, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, 300,000 actually, I think, all to vote for Jeremy. And surprise, surprise, the concept that started with it was just, a gesture to the left. He actually got the votes and became the leader of the opposition. He then has been very, very shrewd in cementing his position, bringing in fellow travellers under the socialist banner. And he went to the election as the leader of the Labour Party with this incredible program. They call it a manifesto. I don't know why. I can understand the socialists like manifesto. It's a communist word, but even the conservative parties can refer to their platform as a manifesto. I think that's disgusting. Anyway, just so far left and impossible to deliver, incredible, just not enough money in the world to pay for it, ridiculous. In the meantime, what was happening on the other side of the camp is Boris, who's a real character. He looks it and he is. He's a great pants man. He's got five children that he acknowledges from 3 different women, 2 of whom were his wife, and there's another one flying around somewhere, another child somewhere, not to be talked about apparently, and he's now got a new girlfriend who's about 25 years younger than him, so good for him. But Boris is an old Etonian, Bullingdon club boozer, good rugby player, front rower, tough guy, very, very tough guy. And he's been a bit of a star. He was a great writer, he's a great wordsmith, great admirer of Churchill, educated internationally, wonderful at languages, wonderful turn of phrase, and he's variously written for the Telegraph, the Times. He was editor of the Spectator for many years, and he then had a short stint in Parliament and then got himself elected for 2 terms as Mayor of London, which is really a left-wing Labour city. He always has been. But he did 2 terms as Mayor, very, very successful. Did a great job with the Olympic Games in London, and then went back into the party, the Conservative Party. He then, David Cameron, the previous but one, go back to iterations of Prime Minister, was then Prime Minister, and he was under pressure and had been for a long time to have a vote on Brexit. And it was a bit like the Jeremy Corbyn story. Eventually he said, yeah, well, you can have the vote. The government's going to campaign against it. We're all Eurocrats. We want to stay in the European Union. We love Europe. We love the bureaucracy, all that sort of stuff, which then duly got started. And Boris got himself up and said, well, I'm going to front the Leave campaign. I'm going to promote the Leave Brexit. And what he is he's a marvellous salesman. He's not a great detail guy, but he's a marvellous salesman. And the British, the whole of Great Britain, voted in favour of Brexit, wanting to leave the European Union after 40-something years as a member. And everyone thought naturally he'd be the person to lead the Conservatives to get Brexit done, but no, they wouldn't have him. Those rusted-on old oysters at the top of the pole, they didn't want a new broom in there, so they elected this poor unfortunate woman, Theresa May, who had been a minister, the Home Secretary, I think, under the Cameron government, and she was pro-European herself and voted to remain in the European Union, and they got her in as Prime Minister for 3 years. It's now 4 years. It's been going on for 3.5 years. For those whole 3 years, she managed to negotiate everything she could to effectively keep Britain in the European Union. She and her colleagues had absolutely no commitment to following the wishes of the British people to leave the European Union. Eventually, even her own colleagues thought that was too much, and the House of Commons, the mother of all parliaments, went into almost lockdown. There was a schism with perhaps the 18-20 of the leaders of that party historically, who were opposed to any form of Brexit, and they were voting against their own government. They defeated Theresa May's bills on a couple of occasions. She, of due course, had to resign, and the party picked a new leader, and they chose Boris. And he's a very different kettle of fish. He's all about get Brexit done, and he made the wonderful point that Theresa May went into negotiations with Europe saying, no Brexit, leaving without a deal is off the table. Well, if that was off the table, what possible clout did she possibly have? And of course, the Europeans, largely headed by France, are determined to make an example of Britain so that nobody else is tempted to leave the European Union. They want to make it as unpleasant as they possibly can for Britain. And of course, I think the French have never forgotten Waterloo, and certainly have never forgiven the Brits for A, Waterloo, and B, saving them from the Hun during the war. Second World War, terrible group of people, the French. Women are nice, men are a real problem, particularly their politicians. So Boris inherited that, and he was locked into a minority government. Theresa May had frittered away her majority that she'd inherited, and they were dependent on an obscure Irish DUP party to support them, and only had a couple of votes in it. So when this clique of the leaders of the Conservative Party turned against Boris, who was really showing he was determined to get Brexit done, make it real, he was locked into a minority government. He couldn't call for an election because the law in England has been changed. You'd have elections are now run for 5 years unless there's agreement from both sides. Parliament, the Prime Minister used to be able to call an election whenever it suited him, no more. So he couldn't call an election. Everything he put up the Parliament was getting defeated by a combination of his own party voting with the opposition, Labour and the Greens and the Liberal Democrats and a few other scallywags. And that went on for a good part of this year, until eventually the polls showed that the Liberal Democrats had a really, really good chance if they called an election. And they had a rather silly woman who'd been a parliamentarian for not too long, and she got terribly excited and even went so far as to make the statement that she thought if the election was called, she could be the Prime Minister of England. Well, anyway, Labour then agreed to an election, and Boris was off the hook. He could have an election. And that election was on the 12th of December, and to put it mildly, he's killed them. The Conservatives have got the biggest election result since the Maggie Thatcher days, which is probably long before a lot of you even remember. He's got a massive, massive majority. He calls it a stonking great majority, and who am I to disagree with him? And justice has been provided to all of these traitors who've been voting against their own party. A large number of them they're all of the view that the vast majority of them represented electorates that had voted leave. In other words, represented electorates that wanted to get Brexit done, that wanted to leave the European Union. But they were not voting that way. They were voting the other way. And it was put to them, not terribly forcefully, you represent your electorate, and they voted leave. Shouldn't you be supporting this? No, at all, not at all. We don't. We're not here to vote whatever they think. We're here to, as a seasoned and responsible individuals, selected for our knowledge, etc., to exercise our best judgment on behalf of the electorate, which is a lot of BS, let me tell you. But these guys, all of them, they were finished up being about 11 of the 17, went off and joined other parties and stood in their old seat, confident that their great persona and the public love of them would see them re-elected. Some of them went to other seats and tried to get new seats. They got wiped out, every single one of them. And these are big names, people who'd been the Chancellor of the Exchequer, that's the Treasurer, if you like, for years and years of the Conservative Party. Another guy being the Attorney General, very, very senior people. And they had the hubris to think that this supposedly, hi Suhasini, good you made it, supposedly the love of the electorate would see them re-elected. Well, they just got a message in the brutality and reality of politics that you're not our member, you're out, God don't want you, don't come near us. And they're gone. Some very, very luminous people, luminaries, I should say, not luminous. Maybe they're luminous when they've had a few drinks, who knows. So there you got this same thing that one of these creatures, let me see if we go to the next page, I'll show you. This one on the left, the scary-looking guy, that's John Bercow, who has been the Speaker of the House. Effectively, he runs proceedings in the House of Commons, and he's got a very, very powerful role, nothing like what happens in the US, and pretty much unlike what happens in Australia as well. He runs the proceedings, and he is a long-time member of the Conservative Party. But he pretty well led the revolt against Boris and leaving the European Union. A bit like I was telling you about the ex-Australian foreign minister. He had the temerity, after he'd resigned from his post with a whopping great retirement benefit, of course, naturally, to go off to a television station and say, I'd like to be your commentator during the election and get rid of all these horrible people, and he was. He did the same thing as she had done. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. And the grey-haired old guy next to him holding up the bag, the satchel, that's the Philip Hammond. He'd been the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Treasurer, for Great Britain for many, many years. And he led the revolt against Boris, but thankfully he too is gone. Amazing how things repeat themselves, isn't it? So here's the big news that's going to happen for the UK going forward. 31st of January in the new year, which is only a couple of weeks away now, they leave the European Union after 40-plus years of membership. So that's just the start. They've then got to negotiate what's called the political agreement, which is the negotiations, the relationships between these parties going forward, what tariffs they're going to have, what rules are they going to have about employment. I mean, there are rules about bananas in the EU. I mean, it is just bureaucracy gone mad. It's nations of bureaucracy run by bureaucrats, crazy stuff. But they've got to have this all negotiated by December, coming next year, 1 year to go. And of course, the Europeans immediately they can't possibly negotiate an agreement like this. It's going to take 5 years, 3 years at least. I mean, just stall, just bureaucracy. And Boris is not having any of it. He's actually, next week, he's pushing to put into law that Britain will not ask for an extension of that. So Europe in particular, France in particular, in Europe, try to make an example of the British to show that if you try to leave the European Union, you'll be punished. You won't be rewarded by good terms, good relationships, or any benefits at all. And they're intent on humiliating the UK, as they have been doing to date. My guess is that Boris is going to be a much tougher character than these ones we've seen who are really just soft and weak and pretty much off. Okay, USA is going to have a huge year. I mean, it's a presidential election year next year, folks. If you don't follow US politics, you should, because it's huge at the moment. And what happens in the US, as goes the US, so goes the Western world. And it starts with the Senate taking up the impeachment proceedings against Trump, which the Democrats have passed. That's a bit of a joke. There has been no due process. Don't even think about the rights and wrongs of it. It has just been so incredibly biased. No due process, no cross-examination of witnesses, no proven witnesses of fact. Absolute amateur hour. I mean, it should be totally embarrassing for those in Congress who've been party to that. And Schiff, who ran it all, I think he's a lawyer. They've got enough lawyers in there to sink a battleship. But it was totally no due process. Let alone get to any facts of the matter. So, but what's going to happen going forward, because it's an election year as well, it's the Democrats deciding to impeach Trump. Remember, first they're going to impeach him on the Russia issue, hoping that Mueller would give them the goods, and they'd be able to impeach him on conspiracy with Russia to rig the 2016 election. Mueller came out and said that's rubbish, it never happened, there's no evidence. That was the end of that. So then they moved on. Then it was going to be Ukraine. Then it's bribery. Then it's obstructing Congress. I mean, give me a break. Lots of water to flow under the bridge about all that. But this presidential election is going to be really, really impactful. While this is all going on, don't ever take your eyes off China. China, the big news has been really that Trump thought China would buckle to tariffs. And he was very confident about that, given the massive disparity in trade balances. I mean, US just buys so much of its stuff from China, and China's played them off a break. Remember, China is a command economy. It's not a democracy. The whole of the economic world in China does pretty much what they're told to do. Who would know whether they're suffering from the trade war or not? Their fiscal figures have been dubious at best, but I think 2020 is just going to see this ongoing competition from China, particularly in its sphere of influence. I think it's going to be a big issue going forward, a very difficult issue, not only for the US, but for other countries. Australia has its one of its very, very major trade relationships with China. Well, that's where a lot of the coal and the iron ore is going, iron ore in particular, that's where it goes to, China. And it may even be, you could even say that Australia's a little bit dependent on China. And China don't like what's happening in Australia with some of the politicians standing up for its own independence and criticising the Chinese human rights record. So there's some real conflicts and issues there that are going to have to be dealt with. This political uncertainty and stress shows best in the cross rates on the currencies. You can see here, this is the UK general election when Boris was elected. Whoosh, up went the huge big spike. What happened? It's the old thing of buy the rumour, sell the news, and then turn around heading down now. But this sort of, you can see this is the British pound, Swiss franc. The chief is the Swiss franc. You can see almost every one of these little ups and downs has been on political news at the moment. It has until this election played a huge part in the emotion of the economy over there. This result now should settle it all down. This is the Australian US dollar index for the last 3-4 years. I've been telling you this would be the best short of the next year. And it's really trying to find a bottom. I've been forecasting it had to get well below 65, but it's finding a bottom there. Not so much momentum at the moment, but we'll see what happens. It won't take much to tip over the Australian economy. It's fairly fragile. despite the public relations view. This is the British pound, how it's been reacting. You see, in fact, it's just been remarkably stable on its downtrend for years and years and years and years. The last spike was in very early 2014. Here we are, 5.5 years later. It's just tried to find a bottom, but I think after the exit from Brexit happens in the end of January, I think the British pound could be under a bit of pressure. I think I'm going to make the British pound the best short of 2020. We'll see what happens. But basically, as goes the US, so goes the rest of the Western world. So, I mean, what's going to happen in the US president elections is actually enormously important. Trump's an unashamed market booster. You know, I mean, he just talks the market up all the time. He yells at the, literally yells at the governor of the Fed if the interest rates go up. Yells at the poor bloody Mnuchin, the treasurer, if the US dollar gets stronger. And Trump has done everything he possibly can to boost the share market, and been very, very successful at it as well. So have a look what's coming up, what the options are. So you've got Sanders, whose popularity, excuse me, morning hay fever, is remarkable. I mean, he's a silly old guy, but his politics are really, you know, he's a socialist. He says he's a social democrat. His figures are holding up remarkably well. He's a big player in all of this, but he's essentially unelectable. He's unelectable because he's not really a Democrat. He's an independent that runs with the Democrats when it suits him. Don't forget the polls and the votes of the party members are one thing. There's also a huge reservoir in reserve that nominating the presidential candidate. There's a huge reservoir in reserve that's reserved for party officials of the Democratic Party, and it's a very substantial percentage. That was what really threw Sanders away and went for Hillary in the 2016 contest. But Sanders is unelectable because the Democratic Party is not going to support him with those top of the table votes. Warren, I think, is unelectable. She's gone a bit the Jeremy Corbyn way, got too far left, too extreme. The costings of the policies she's talking about, it's impossible to see how that becomes affordable, given, don't forget, the US is on a very, very steep trajectory with its debt at the moment rising since Trump put through the tax cuts. The government is collecting considerably less money than they have in previous years, and they're certainly spending like there's no tomorrow. So debt's going to become an issue, and Warren, I just think she's unelectable. I don't think that it's a bit like the Corbyn thing. You can promise them the world for nothing. You don't have to pay. I'll give you this, give you that. There's a level at which, I mean, the electorate is much smarter than anyone ever gives it credit for. And there is a level at which the electorate just said, I don't believe this. And that's really what happened to Corbyn, added with the fact that personally he was very unpopular, good, decent backbone of the Labour Party type, just couldn't see him as being the Prime Minister of Great Britain. With his IRA and Palestinian terrorist links, and of course an anti-Semite. Corbyn, the Labour Party in England has a big problem. It's got a very strong anti-Semitic wing in it, and that's a big problem for them. That's common to most socialist parties, incidentally. Anyway, I don't think she's electable. Mayor Pete is unelectable. I'm glad I'm calling him Mayor Pete because I can't pronounce his surname, but He's too small time. He might be a very viable candidate in the future, but he just hasn't got a big enough of a vote, and he hasn't got the magic that Obama had or Trump had. You can call it whatever you like, but they were both guys who just sparked, brought flame to the whole process, brought life and vision and energy. And Pete's not doing that. I think Bloomberg's unelectable. Those of you who follow American politics will know that he is particularly unpopular with black people due to his stop and frisk policies he had in New York, which disproportionately targeted young men, coloured men in particular. I don't think that's been forgotten. I don't think he's an attractive candidate anyway, but isn't it weird that with all the push for the liberal and the new millennials and this, that and the other, you finish up with Trump, Sanders, Bloomberg, Biden, all ancient white men, and I mean, they're older than me, so I can tell you they're getting on. Elderly white men, no coloured people left in the race of any effect at all. Interesting. I think Bloomberg's unelectable. So Democrats will finish up with Biden on the probabilities. I think Biden's probably a 3 out of 4 chance to get the nomination if things stay the way they are. The problem is that Biden is a weak candidate. I think he probably is very knowledgeable. He certainly is very well regarded in the black community, which is a huge part of the Democratic vote. If you can't carry the black community with you as a Democrat, you're not going to get in. It's that simple. But Biden's very much trusted and liked by the colored community. But he's a weak candidate because he's old. Now I know the other guys are old, and Trump plays golf 3 times a week if he can, and Bloomberg looks fit enough. But Biden's that age, and he's showing it. He's a bit unsteady, a bit forgetful, just not in the peak of condition. Let's be charitable and put it that way. But so who is the Democratic savior? I mean, I just don't see the Democrats sitting back and going to their convention with 2 or 3 weak candidates. I mean, who is the Democrat who could really stand up to Trump? Who is the Democrat who you would want to put money on to beat Trump? And I think there's only one, and it's Michelle Obama. She is enormously popular in the States. She is a seriously smart woman. I think she's a tough lady. I think she had Barack right under the thumb, as many wives do. He's not Robinson Crusoe there, but she's done very, very well with the book writing. They've just bought a $40 million estate. He didn't get that off his president's salary and paying taxes on it. So they're very well off financially. Is she going to be tempted? She says she won't run, but oh boy, there got to be enough people speaking in her ear and saying, you are one who could, probably the most popular woman in America at the moment, maybe the most popular individual in America. Who knows? I think she's got to be a chance. Hillary, I think, would like to have a go. I think she's had a chance. I think she's over. I think the press just keep that pot boiling a little bit. They give them something to write about. But wouldn't that be interesting? There's got to be something more happen between now and the convention, and it's got to be earlier rather than later. I just don't see how those who really do control the Democratic Party can be happy sitting there with the candidates they've got and thinking that any of them is going to be able to handle Trump on the stump. And he's a handful, isn't he? He really is. He's a dynamo. And the big sleeper for 2020 is going to be debt. Consumer debt. We've already got issues with consumer debt in America. People can't afford to buy cars. They've lengthened the terms. They've rigged the trade-ins, done everything they possibly can to keep the car finance business going, but it's getting very sticky. There's a few issues there. Mortgage debt. Well, you see what happened in Australia. The banks didn't put up interest rates. They they just got stricter on their lending criteria, and the market had a heart attack. It dropped to 12-14%, literally in a few weeks. That's how highly geared markets react. That they it doesn't take much to throw them off balance. So that was just simply the banks tightening up their lending criteria. Nothing, not to anything onerous, but just like to something realistic. Like if you claim you've got a job and a salary, show us the proof. Bring us a pay slip, or show us your employment contract, and that was enough to to knock the cream and most of the milk off the top of the property market as well. It's very, very, very fragile, and I don't know whether this becomes an issue next year, but we know already that China, UK, and USA all have huge spending programs going on. Trump's tax cuts mean the US is collecting less tax revenue than it has historically. The big winner from Trump's tax cuts were the guys with the big dollars, and they're spending, they're saving most of it. They're not paying tax on much of it. I think the average tax rate, the net effective tax rate for the biggest 200 companies in the States is about less than 12%, which is less than half what the statutory rate is. That's all the deductions and loopholes and what have you, and in this country it's much the same, and perhaps worse, who knows. So for those of you who are contemplating Christmas and thinking how nice it would be to have someone else pay for all your expenses, like all the shopping you have to do and the Christmas celebrations, and no doubt a little bit of a Christmas holiday sometime somewhere, a lot of expenses all add up. Well, if you've been following Success, Success is doing its very, very best to hand over to us as much money as it possibly can. Now, I put these together this morning in a hurry, and the one bar the 11th, some of these markets didn't get in. It shows them getting in on the 11th. Some of them actually got long on the 11th, but they, or short as the case may be, whichever was the right way, but they made dollars with a discretionary trailing stop. They made money, but there might be something like less than half a day's average daily range difference in that for some of these. So don't hold me to everything literally, but you can. I can put my hand on my heart for 90% of it. Crude oil, that's made us $1,800 to today's close. This is just the latest trade. This is just the current trade. S&P 3,500 odd dollars. Of course, we've been blessed with the all of the equities. They've all been on a roar, haven't they? There was 3,500 so far in the S&P. E-mini, here's heating oil, $3,000 odd. Natural gas, a biggie, $5,600 into today's close. Russell 2000, $1,800. Soybeans over $1,000, we got short today, and then stopped out on the discretionary trailing stop. I'm not sure, don't quote me on that, I have to look at the book of words. So that's about $15,000 just in those Success, the recent Success trades, just a few $100 under 15,000 in those ones I've shown you. Have they all been that good? Most of them have been good or thereabouts. The one that hasn't has been coffee. Coffee's given us a bit of a thumping with a double whip back reversal earlier this week. It's been not nice, but the others have been doing their very best to make it a happy Christmas and hand over the goodies and hand over the lolly to pay for everything, which is great. Don't forget, folks, if you'd like to learn how to do all this stuff, you can be a super trader. Let me know. We'll be starting classes again early in January. Send me an email with your phone number on it and where you live, so I don't wake you up in the middle of the night, and I'll be happy to call you and we'll have a chat about your trading. And if you want to be a great trader, I can make you that trader. I can teach you to trade price, but more importantly, trading Daniel Code time has been the biggie. Murph, thanks, mate. I meant to contact you. I know we're overdue for a session, but I will. Let's just wrap this up. Mrs. Needham, my children, and Terry and his family, folks, they join me in wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Monday's the 23rd. I guess that's going to be about wrap it up for Christmas, where they're going to be closed until the second trading day in the new year. If you haven't already had a free trial, please go to the Daniel Code website. Just click the free trial link, follow the prompts. Any problems, contact Terry at support@thedanielcode.com. And you can see what we do for you here. And we've been doing it now, as I said, for over 11 years. And most years like this year, I haven't had a day off since this time last year. We always say we'll take off, trading's a tiring business. We'll try to take off 1 week every quarter. We haven't this year, and we didn't last year, and I'm pretty sure we didn't the year before. It's just been 365 straight down the line. Never miss a beat. Let's get compliance. Be careful with trading, folks. If you don't know what you're doing, you can lose your money very, very quickly indeed. And it's a real problem. Okay, so that's about all we've got. John, thank you. Have a great Christmas. I'm looking forward to it. And let's have a chat in the new year, John, if not before. Thank you for being with us, folks. As I say, we're going to be, today's pretty well Friday. Down under here for me, it's pretty well ready to start getting started, wrapped up. Monday, we'll do charts this weekend because futures, Forex traders in particular, are still going to want to trade next week, I guess. We'll update the charts on Sunday and Monday, and then we'll be closed until the second trading day of the new year. So all the best to you, Hank. I promise you, you're my first task after I go and do the kids' shopping this afternoon. Jeff, glad you enjoyed it. So thank you for being with us, folks. And thank you for being with us not only from all of 2019, but for some of you, you're getting on towards the 11 years. It's a long time to be together, and I certainly very, very much appreciate the support of all of you. So all the best, folks, and a very Merry Christmas and a safe Christmas to you. Bye-bye for now. Thank you, Rolf. Thank you, Rolf. Sensibility and considered wisdom, inspirational, these fast-moving times. My pleasure. My gosh, what a lovely compliment from you. All the best, my friend. We look forward to talking to you in the new year. Bye-bye.